Today I'm going to show you some examples of my version of a wiper card and how I built it. I use products from many different companies on a regular basis in my card making. However, today most of the items I used were from Stampin' Up. Some of them are current and some are retired. The paper that I used on the dog card that I'll show you last and also show you in the assembly is from an old Die Cuts with a View paper pad. My version of the wiper card is this. Instead of opening from the top, the wiper opening from the top, it pops out from behind this bar here. I have found it is an incredibly versatile card. You can do many different themes with it. Here's a birthday card that I made with it, with the balloons popping up. And finally, this is the one that I will show you how I built today. One thing that I do with these cards is the mechanism inside I cut at an angle and also cut a lot of it away so that if the card is flat, you do see that, but that's not the way the card is displayed. The card is displayed in a partially open version. So the challenge was to get the items that need to sit square on it, straight, and at the same time have it hide totally. I can see now on this one that there's a tiny smidge of his nose that is showing above the banner, but I think that I'm generally my greatest critic on these. So enjoy and follow along as I make this one. Now it's time to cut and score the paper that we're going to use for this card. For the card base, it is cut 4 1/4 inches by 8 inches. It is scored at 6 1/4 inches and 5 1/4 inches. And let me just tell you something that I learned this week from my mother, actually. When it is a very heavy cardstock or one that you think is going to fracture for any reason on the score lines, score one side, turn it over, and score the other side, and you are much more likely to have a clean fold line. Next piece that you cut is for the lower part of the card, and it is cut 2 1/4 inches by 8 inches. You score it at 1 3/4 inches and 2 3/4 inches. This paper is a good example of one that you would want to score front and back side because of these little enameled dog bones on it, and they are very likely to fracture at that point. And you're, again, more likely to get a clean fold if you've scored both sides of it. Next item up is the wiper mechanism. This is a very peculiar little piece. Basically, though, you start off with a piece that is cut 1 1/2 inches by 1 3/4 inches. I like to start off with the same paper, same color of paper that the decorator panels are going to be on the inside of the card. However, during assembly of the card, parts of this will be cut away, and I will show you as we go along. You also have the wiper element, and I also like to use a piece of acetate. The acetate, the lightweight acetate that you use for windows and shaker cards is really too light for it. What I have used here are the leftover pieces from laminator pouches that I have assembled. I also like to use the red line tape to attach this also, since it gets so much use. For this particular size card, the maximum size of the wiper element is 2 inches wide by 3 inches tall. Otherwise, it's going to peek out from behind that lower bar on the card. Now, here I have assembled a decorator panel that's going to go in the back of the card. The overall panel is cut 5 1/8 inches by 4 1/8 inches. I determined the size of the grass that I put in here just by holding the front bar that's going to cover it in front of it and deciding how high up I wanted it to show beyond that. The side decorator panels, you cut 1 7/8 inch by 7/8 inch and 1 7/8 inch by 1 5/8 inch. If your paper has an up and down direction to it, you want to have the 1 7/8 inch cut this direction. Now, you also want to have a panel cut for the back of the card to do your writing on. You could do some additional stamping if you care to. That panel is cut 4 1/8 by 5 1/8 inches. And you want to have another panel cut for the sentiment that you're putting on the front of the card. Again, that depends on what size the sentiment is. I'm going to start assembling this card by starting off with the card base, the piece that's 4 1/4 inches by 8 inches. First of all, with the score lines on the right-hand side, you will fold and crease and fold and crease. I personally don't like to crease it this way and then immediately fold back, because I too often get a line here behind this fold here. So you have this one. And my paper that I'm using here is an extremely heavy cardstock, so I really work at it hard. Next thing I want to do is get the main decorator panel, the one that's overall measures 5 1/8 by 4 1/8, and I will attach it to that large panel on the inside. Oops. And as usual, it's never convenient when you run out of tape. And center this in that panel. Next are these two smaller pieces, the 1 1/8 by 7/8 and the 1 1/8 by 1 5/8. So you now have this much of the card done. We're going to start working on the wiper mechanism right now. What I want you to do is set the paper down so that you have the 1 3/4 inch going vertically and the 1 1/2 inch going horizontally. And you're going to need to start making some marks on this. First of all, measuring from the bottom up, you want to put a mark at 7/8 of an inch. And from the right side in, you want to put another mark that's at 7/8 of an inch. This line is going to be scored and folded. If you have a good straight edge like this, you don't necessarily need to score it, but you do need to crease it very well and fold it back and forth a couple of times as you are folding it. This needs to move freely. All right, now measure up on the right hand side from the bottom, measure up 1 1/2 inches and put a mark. And draw from the point down to that mark and cut that section away. Now you need to get your lower card base, the piece that you cut 2 1/4 inches by 8 inches. You have scored it at 1 3/4 inches and 2 1/4. Excuse me, 1 3/4 inches and 2 3/4 inches. Crease those score lines. What you do now is take this section that you have just folded over with the score lines on the left-hand side. Flip it horizontally so you still have the score lines on the left-hand side. Now, take your wiper mechanism and with this creased triangle on the upper left-hand side, the angle with the longer piece on the right-hand side, lay it in here and position it so that the 1 1/2 inch side, the shorter side, lines up with this part of the card, and that the crease in the center upper side lines up with the score line, the crease line right here. Then take that triangle and fold it back. Get it repositioned. I didn't have my glue open. Okay, now I have that triangle folded back. Put a good amount of glue so that you thoroughly cover that edge, but not so that it's going to ooze out, because you want to have the rest of this mechanism free. Fold that down and hold it in place. Doesn't take long for it to work. Now lift the other part of it and make sure that it does move freely, that you've not accidentally squeezed glue out under that section. At this point, you take the wiper mechanism, or the wiper element. In this case, it's the dog. What you want to do is lift that mechanism up so you see the triangle there, and then fold it in like this. You will then attach the exposed rectangle here to the bottom left-hand side of the card. And you want to use a good amount of glue, that not so much it oozes out. You also want to make sure that you've got everything lined up so that the bottom of this piece lines up with the bottom of the card. Hold it until it's nice and firm. All right, now open this up and you have this mechanism. What you're going to do at this point is insert the wiper element. You need to make sure when it is lying this direction that it does not extend beyond where this is going to cover up. So I use a ruler to see that. Now also, you see this angle, this is cut at an angle. The reason that it's cut at an angle is that when the card opens up, if this is cut at an angle, the wiper element will be straight. So what you want to do is kind of audition your wiper element in there. You want to have it about centered in there, and cut the rest of that off. And if I had put the red line tape on the other side of this acetate, it would have been easier, but I didn't. So what I need to do is work through a little bit differently on the assembly of it. Again, line it up so that it's going to be within that piece that will be covered up by that bottom part of it, and line the bottom of the element that you want flat along the bottom side of that wiper mechanism. So you now have that. All right, now you have to start doing a little bit of trimming at this point. I have my acetate sticking out a little bit more there, so I'm going to cut that off. And I can also, keeping in mind that I need everything that the acetate is connected to, I'm going to cut this part off. That will minimize what is seen when the card is popped. All right, now fold him in there. And you are ready for the final part of the assembly of this card. Glue here in this section below where you put the decorator panel. Close it over and hold it. Then, as you open it, you have your little dog pop-up. You close it and he is hid completely in there. Pull it open and he pops. So enjoy.